guys, it's Reagan and welcome back to another video. Today's video, I'm honestly a little shocked and confused that somehow I'm already making it, but it's official. We are halfway through 2025, which can only mean one thing. It's time to do some mid-year freaking out about all of the books I've read so far. I want to say I've read just under 40 books so far, which does put me just about on track to complete my reading goal. That being said though, there are definitely some books I desperately need to get to before the end of the year, but I'm also happy to report that I've read some amazing books so far, so I'm really excited to chat about them with you guys today. But before we dive into the best and worst books I've read so far this year, first a word from this video's sponsor, which is Curology. I'm so excited to be partnering up with my baes over at Curology for this video because again, they're quite literally products I use every single day, morning and night. They have completely become embedded into my skincare routine. But if you're not familiar, Curology is a leader in made-for-you skincare, and through their site, you're able to shop a plethora of skincare items from cleanser, moisturizer, various serums. And the best part is it's so convenient because everything is sent directly to your door. Also through Curology, you're able to work with a skincare provider to gain access to skincare items with active ingredients. So if you're looking to target things like acne or fine lines and wrinkles, it's such a fantastic resource. I also love Curology because I can check in with my provider and they can make updates to my prescription if they think I need it or if we need to make a change based on the season. Speaking of the season, obviously we're now into the depths of summer. It's hot, it's sunny, and it's probably my least favorite time of year when it comes to my skin and skincare because I'm equal parts sweating and so oily, but I still have my incredibly dry and sensitive skin. But luckily, my routine gets to stay so simple with Curology. I've been using their tretinoin-based product now for over a year, and I've loved what it's done to my skin, but they've recently updated their prescription to include a hydrating element to it, which I have been loving. Tretinoin can be drying, especially for me, so the hydration element has completely changed the game and I'm obsessed with this. And obviously I've been pairing that up with their Hydro Plus line. This is great all year, but I feel like especially in the summer because all of these products also have a soothing and cooling element to it. The cleanser has aloe and the moisturizer has hyaluronic acid, and it just feels amazing on the skin, especially after a long hot day outside. And there's even an amazing eye cream too with this really nice cooling like metal applicator. I look forward to putting this on every night. I of course have a very special offer code. If you guys click the link down below or go to the URL on the screen, you're able to access. But thank you again to Curology for sponsoring this video, but let's go ahead and dive back into the book. So if you're not familiar with the mid-year freakout tag, it's basically a series of questions which makes you reflect on all the various things you've read so far this year. So let's just go ahead and kick it off, starting with the most pressing question. What is the best book you have read so far this year? The first book I'm going to show off is The Vanished Birds by Simon Jimenez. Simon Jimenez has quickly become one of my favorite authors of all time. I've only read two of his books, but both of them have been clear 5 out of 5 star reads for me. This Simon Jimenez release is actually a sci-fi novel, and it was honestly a really interesting blend of what I feel like is typical sci-fi with literary fiction. It's definitely slower and much more of a character study, but it also still had a lot of intensity, which you often find within this type of genre fiction. Overall, I just felt like it made a very successful and entertaining good time. This follows our main character Nia, and Nia is a ship captain, and she lives in a reality where she loses large swaths of time because she's traveling through like distant stars in space. But due to like the physics of space, she might only grow 1 year older, but she's maybe lost a decade of time, making her have a lot of distance between the ones she knows and loves the most. So obviously this creates a very lonely existence for our main character. Unexpectedly, she comes across a lost young boy, and his only means of communication is through a flute, and kind of an unlikely bond begins to form. It's very much a found family situation, but I will say this book has a lot more intensity than the synopsis might illustrate initially. Alongside those present day chapters of Nia existing on the ship as a ship captain, and also the chapters following this young boy as he begins to live in this new place, we also get these sort of sub-chapters following characters from across the galaxy, sometimes like a few years before the start of this novel, sometimes countless generations before, and you begin to see this interwoven experience of like time, human experience. It's incredibly like thought-provoking, it's quite heartbreaking, beautifully written. Simon Jimenez's writing style is truly one of my favorites in the space right now. He creates this like quiet somberness as you go along, and it just works so well. So yes, definitely one of the best books I've read so far this year. If you've not read something by Simon Jimenez, you're definitely missing out. I would have to say my other favorite thing I've read so far this year, it's definitely a bit of an emotional pivot, but it has to be the Age of Madness series by Joe Abercrombie. So far, I've read the first 2 books. Both of them have both been a 5 out of 5 stars. I have now read over 9 or 10 Joe Abercrombie books, and I just love his combination of like wild, unlikable but likable characters, grim dark fantasy plot lines, and just a level of chaos he really brings to my life in a way that I just deeply appreciate. This trilogy is set in the same world that most of his books are set in, but we're sort of entering a new age, one of economic advancement and innovation and the rise of a new middle class, if you will. But with this industrialization, it's also brought a whole new host of miseries for the everyday man, and we see that definitely play out. Specifically, we have stagnant wars and lots of debt piled onto this well-known kingdom. We have the privatization of land and the increase of industry with very little labor reform and protections. And we have a set of characters sort of working through this space in very different and interesting ways. Some of them are politically powerful and economically weak. Some of them are politically weak, very economically powerful, and many, many different things in between. The characters of this second series, I think, are just some of my favorite. I loved the first trilogy so much, but there's just something about this like second wave of youth and folly that I have just been obsessed with. I've also been really into labor uprising like fantasy stories, so this definitely fits the bill there. I still need to read book 3, which I plan to do before the end of this year, but I have adored this series so much, and it also has a lot to do with just my deep, unending love for the character of Orso. It's just like the series shocks me and entertains me. I'm laughing, I'm crying, I'm on the edge of my seat. It just has everything I love within the fantasy genre. The next question is, what is the best sequel you've read so far this year? And I also have 2 for this response as well. I've actually read a lot of really fantastic sequels. It's kind of been the year of the sequel for me, but I did narrow it down. The first one has to be A Drop of Corruption by Robert Jackson Bennett. This is just one of my current favorite releasing series at the moment. It's the perfect combination of mystery and fantasy, and I also feel like I've been talking about it incessantly, but for good reason, because both of them so far have been 5 out of 5 stars. This is a classic closed-door murder mystery set in a fantasy landscape that I often describe as like Godzilla meets Attack on Titan. There are essentially these massive walls that are maintained by a powerful government to prevent these monsters from coming to destroy society. In this series, we're introduced to first our main character named Din, and he has had some alterations that allows him to have a photographic memory, which also gives him the position of working alongside detectives to catalog crime scenes and evidence. His boss is a detective named Anna, and she is very, very, very strange, eccentric, demanding, but incredibly talented. It's very much giving Sherlock and Watson, and their relationship is definitely like the core element of the series and the part of the book that I love so much. But that is also coupled with like very engaging mystery plot lines, ones that are utilizing like really fun mystery tropes, but sort of reworked and reframed for a fantasy landscape. Each installment of the series has just been so good. Each one also has its own contained mystery to try to solve and figure out. There's many reveals along the way, and it just has like that classic structure to it that just makes it so unbelievably fun. I adore this series. I also feel like this is a great pickup even if you don't often read fantasy, because the mystery element is like very much to the forefront. The fantasy component gives it a very refreshing setting to experience those mystery storylines, you know? My next favorite sequel has to be Before Your Memory Fades and Tales from the Cafe from Toshikazu Kawaguchi. I read Before the Coffee Gets Cold a couple years ago and I liked it, but I recently picked up books 2 and 3 from this series and loved them. I don't know if it was like a time and place element for me, but just the story, the writing style just felt so emotionally impactful. I was laughing, I was crying. It was just like a very beautiful and moving experience. This series is basically set within a coffee shop in Tokyo, and here patrons can come and, following a very specific set of rules, can travel back in time. And each book within this series kind of reads like a collection of short stories. You basically follow a set of customers and their reasons for traveling back and that arc of that journey for them. We also kind of zero in on some of the employees that work here and their stories and lives as well. The thing is, like, thematically, it's pretty consistent book over book, very much about like the choice to live and living grieving after like great loss and how the ones that love you most would want you to carry on and sort of the legacy of love and loss. But it's also kind of like a theme that just like never gets old. And I also feel like how the author goes about sharing these stories is just deeply touching and emotional. And just in general, it was a series that I loved a lot. It's both cozy and heartwarming and heartbreaking at the same time. It's a really great mix of bitter and sweet, and I just love it a lot. Next is a new release that you haven't read yet, but you really want to. And for me, there is a book that has quickly risen to the top of my TBR because I've gotten so many DMs and comments about it, and I am dying to pick it up, and that is The Raven Scholar. This book has been getting a lot of buzz, and it also has an incredibly high rating on Goodreads, and it also, based on the synopsis, feels like it's full of a lot of things I really like. But this is said to be full of inventive intrigue, a cutthroat competition, and a quest for a scholar to uncover the truth. It's set in a kingdom, and basically the ruler is looking to step down, and to do this, he's hosting a competition where like the 7 most qualified people compete against each other for the role. But obviously, things don't go to plan because one of the competitors ends up dead. Enter our main character, who is a scholar at this kingdom, and it's up to her to basically figure out who the killer is and untangle this like vast conspiracy that's taken over the court. Literally, I feel like I could not pick a book that's more my vibe than this. We have a mystery. We have lots of court intrigue, secrets and lying and backstabbing. I love a scholar main character. I love plotting. I love people maneuvering behind other people's backs, and I feel like this is going to have all of that. It is 650 pages, but I feel like it's going to be rather entertaining, and I really, really, really want to pick it up. I just bought it. It hasn't arrived yet, but soon I will be reading this. Next question is, what are my most anticipated releases for the second half of this year? There are some heavy hitters coming out in the fall, winter of 2025. I dare say there's already incredible new releases coming out this summer. I'm feeling behind. That being said though, I have 3 I specifically want to mention, and all of them should feel pretty obvious. First, we have Catabasis by R.F. Kuang. This comes out at the end of August, and this is kind of like R.F. Kuang's reimagination of Dante's Inferno. We follow 2 academic rivals and their journey into hell as they compete against each other, with the ultimate goal of saving their professor's soul. Honestly, I don't really need to know much more than that. I love this idea and concept. I'm pretty confident that R.F. Kuang is going to be able to pull it off. I really tend to enjoy her writing style, her character work, and just like her worlds in general. So obviously this is very much at the top of my list to read. Then we have The Strength of the Few by James Islington. This is the second book to the Will of the Many series, a very fast-paced, very electrifying recent release which came out a few years ago. I know many of us are anticipating this second installment because the plot really left us hanging there at the end. This fantasy series is set in a Roman-inspired world, and here this very powerful empire reigns supreme, and everyone has to give over their will to the empire, like literally and metaphorically. This will is basically their magic system. The higher you are up in their like caste system, the more access to will you have, makes you like faster, stronger, all of these things. Our main character has been laying low for most of his life, and he is determined to do anything to prevent having to give over his will to the empire. He gets wrapped up in a couple of different conspiracies. First, he's recruited by one faction of the government to attend this military school and spy for them, and then he's forcibly recruited by a set of rebels to also spy for their organization. So he is just trapped in a web of conspiracy, let's say, and also just trying to go to class, survive, make friends, all of these things. It is so breakneck, like so plot forward. It's just unbelievably entertaining. I really enjoyed the first one. I obviously want to see where the series is going to take us. So I'm gonna read it. And then I also want to give a shout out to Hemlock and Silver by T. Kingfisher. T. Kingfisher, one of my all-time favorite authors. I also feel like her new releases that come out in August kind of kick off my fall reading season. She's so good at making these lyrical, dark reimaginings of well-known fairy tales and stories. And this one is a Snow White reimagining steeped in poison and intrigue and treason galore. And honestly, I don't need to know anything other than that. This is a must-read, priority read for me this fall. Next book is the biggest disappointment you've read so far this year, and honestly I haven't had too many like bad reads, but I will say The Echo Wife was ultimately quite disappointing for me. This just was underwhelming. I felt like the concept was really strong, but the execution was actually kind of boring and lackluster, which is surprising because again, the concept is like quite the hook. It basically follows our main character who's a scientist, and she has discovered how to make clones, and then one day her husband leaves leaves her for a clone of her. And then she gets a phone call from said clone saying her ex-husband is dead, and they work together to like deal with this problem. Again, a perfect example of some really interesting ideas. I liked some of the commentary, but I almost wish it went a little further in its pursuit of these concepts. Just in general, for such a short thriller, I feel like it should have read faster. IMO. Next is the biggest surprise, and I have to go with The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. I'm not surprised that I loved this novel, as this was one of my most anticipated releases, but I was very surprised by like the tone and experience of this novel in a way that I was like thrilled about. I've been describing The Devils by Joe Abercrombie as his interpretation of like a cozy, quest-centered story that has like found family elements, but also has his signature like grimdark style. It's both horrifying and endearing, and I'm not quite sure how he was able to walk that line so successfully, but he did. This essentially follows a very unlikely crew made up of like a very bad priest, a vampire, a necromancer, a werewolf, an elf that can turn invisible, a knight who cannot die, a pirate who's kind of a jack of all trades, and a street urchin who just found out that she is a princess. They basically are traveling the European countryside trying to survive and also transport one of the characters to her new throne. It has so much action and adventure, and the quest-centered element of the plot really serves the narrative quality of the story. But my favorite part by far was the character dynamics, getting to know not only these characters on an individual basis, watching them interact as a group, watching them pair off, and seeing how that sort of played out was so entertaining. This was like laugh out loud funny. I flew through it and was just so entertained. Like I just was not anticipating to feel like this was the coziest book I've read so far in 2025. And it has emotional stakes, but I stand by the cozy label. Next up is new favorite author, either new to you or a debut author. I've honestly mostly read so far this year authors I've read before, but if I had to pick, I think I would go with Marie-Helene Bertino, who is the author of Beautyland, which is a literary fiction sci-fi novel I read this year for book club. I not only fell in love with her writing style, but I found her voice to be incredibly insightful and moving, and I would definitely pick up anything else that she puts out in the future. And I actually do believe this is her debut novel, and it was excellent. Beautyland basically follows our main character, who is an alien. She has always felt different her entire life, and she's also dedicated herself to write down like her thoughts and feelings and analysis of humankind around her and send these faxes off back to her alien brethren. These little clips of her life are not only insightful, but like beautiful renditions of like what it means to be alive. And I find often that books that try to comment on the human condition, or like what does it mean to be alive, or what it means to be a part of this like larger living experience, to sometimes be a little trite, a little underwhelming. But I found this book to actually be like a beautiful portrayal of this. It was so warm and comforting, and our main character was just like a delightful character to follow and read. It's very much like a coming of age story, a coming into self story. You're following her through most of her life. It was just a really beautiful book. And I, again, love the writing style and the insight that the author included within it. I would for sure read more. Next is newest fictional crush, and I'm happy to say I've read a couple of romantasy books that have delivered in that category. First and foremost, probably my biggest fictional crush right now is Connor from the Castellane fantasy series. The Ragpicker King came out this year. 5 out of 5 star read for me, as was Sword Catcher. But there are so many characters in this series to fall in love with. I'm just a sucker for a disgruntled prince who's emotionally distant and torn apart. Like how Cassandra Clare portrays him is quite excellent. But again, there's lots to pick from within this series. I won't go on and on, as I feel like I talk about this series ad nauseum, but this is truly the perfect combination of actually well-written fantasy world building and characters you want to follow, and also like a huge variety of romantic plot lines too. So entertaining, and some of my favorite characters in romantasy right now. But I do also have to give a shout out to Rory within The Knight and the Moth by Rachel Gillig. He's a knight, he wears eyeliner. It was a win for me overall, and I also love an austere Shakespearean inspired medieval setting, and the vibes of this book worked for me, and so did the romantic pairing. It was quite fun. Next is favorite characters so far this year, and that is an easy pick for me. It has to be Prince Orso from the Age of Madness trilogy. I love Prince Orso, and I've read some great characters this year, and still he stands like head and shoulders above everyone. Like he might be in like my top 5 favorite fantasy characters of all time. I am just rooting for him, okay? He's earnest, he's trying his best, but he also is like deplorable and funny in the best ways too. He is like a trademark Joe Abercrombie character, but I can tell Joe Abercrombie also loves Orso because he's kind of the best of them, you know? And I'm a little nervous going into book 3, so we're gonna see what happens. But in terms of his characterization, he's witty, he's funny, he's very aware of his own flaws, and gosh darn it, I wouldn't mind him leading my country either. So you know what? Shout out to Prince Orso. Next is a book that made you cry, and there have been 2 books that I feel like have made me really shed a tear this year. Both of them I've already mentioned. First is Beautyland. It's just a very like tender, heartwarming experience, but also has like big feelings that I feel like anyone would find relatable. It's obviously going to touch on elements of grief and longing and belonging, and I just feel like the author did such a great job, as I've already just literally mentioned. But I for sure teared up quite a few times while reading this. And then the other one should be also no surprise. It's gotta be Before the Coffee Gets Cold series. I mean, again, bittersweet, very emotional stories of loss, and it gets me every time. I am crying in the club every time I pick one of these books up. Every single like individual story makes me cry. It's just like a crying experience, but one that also feels rather cathartic. So again, I recommend. Next is a book that makes you happy. And for this, I'm gonna go with the Whisperwicks. I am a lover of middle grade fantasy, and I feel like the Whisperwicks is just one of the most delightful, well-written middle grade fantasy books I have read in a minute. It's portal fantasy centering family and friendship and perseverance, and just like the themes of this just really touched my heart, and I would recommend this book to anyone. It follows our main character, Benjamin Creek, and he is very science-minded, and he definitely does not believe in magic. So obviously he's challenged one day when a magical doll appears in his life and also unexpectedly opens a portal to another world. He gets sucked in and he finds himself in this new place that is very different than the world he came from. Essentially, this fantasy landscape feels very much inspired by maybe like Victorian England. The world itself is essentially a maze. If you travel too far from your street or where your home is, you might never be able to find your way back. Right away, he finds help within this family, and he makes friends with the daughter that lives there, and they set out on an adventure to try to find her lost brother. This series is truly the best of middle grade. There's a quest, there's trials that the characters have to overcome. There's also like emotional barriers that the characters have to confront too. It was just honestly so good. This book also had me like tearing up at the end. It was just so endearing, like the perfect story, honestly. Next is some beautiful books you've bought so far this year. First, I have to go with The River Has Roots. This is honestly one of my favorite books I've read so far this year. It's a fae-centered short story that was just a stunning reading experience, but alongside that beautiful reading experience, the book itself matches the vibe perfectly. The end pages, the hardcover of the book, and then it also has these beautiful illustrations throughout it that really just elevate the whole thing through and through. So it definitely is like one of the prettiest books I've bought in a minute. Alongside that, I've also been buying some translated literature, and I feel like all of them have such cool covers. First, my edition of Convenience Store Woman, which I bought in London, is probably one of my favorite books I bought this year. I think it's so cool. But also Pachinko Parlor, the colors are so striking. And also this postcard-esque cover for Winter in Sokcho, I feel like is so cool as well. And the pink outline, I just think this book is truly 10 out of 10. And then the last question for this video is, what books do you need to get to before the end of this year? And wow, are there many? But I would say I have some primary ones. The first 2 I definitely should have already gotten to. I am already behind on my reading plans for 2025, but you know what? That's okay. 2025 has gone into a lot of different directions. I'm gonna be kind to myself for this one, but obviously I have to mention Malazan. I was trying to read one book in this series a quarter. I have not started yet, but I do plan to read Gardens of the Moon at least before the end of 2025. The first book to a very long, very lauded, very popular, very dense fantasy series, where I hear the world building in particular is quite excellent. I think it's dark and grim and gruesome, lots of violence, lots of conflict. Gardens of the Moon, I have to read. Additionally, I also really want to read the Dandelion Dynasty, the first one being The Grace of Kings. This is on my TBR for the month of July, so I'm hoping I actually do get to this one in like the next couple of weeks. I've heard nothing but amazing things about Ken Liu's writing. He's been on my like priority TBR list for like a couple of years now, and I just haven't picked it up because they're long, but like I read long books all the time. I need to get it together. Similarly, set in an empire that was once torn apart by war, united united under one emperor, but instead this emperor is like not very effective and things are turning to crap once again. A variety of characters from lots of different places. I feel like this is going to be very political. I think it might be a new fave. And then lastly, the book I definitely want to get to before the end of this year is Nivola by Paolo Bacigalupi. I love this author and I haven't read a book of his in quite a few years now. This is a more recent release of his within the fantasy genre and I'm just so excited about it. It's set in what feels like a Renaissance-esque fantasy world and setting, particularly following a Medici-esque family in terms of political power and might. We follow the heir of this family who really has no interest in ruling, and then I think he like finds a dragon and things kick off from there. I don't know. I'm curious though. Alrighty guys, those are some of my favorite and least favorite books of 2025. Let me know down below some of your favorite books so far you've read this year because I always need recommendations. Thank you again to Curology for sponsoring this video, but I will see you guys soon with another video soon. Goodbye.